mereka dapat. So Indonesia has been sending female migrants overseas due to the high demand from countries such as Middle East, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. And these migrants contributed to Indonesia's development by reducing poverty and employment issue. And they work as middle-low skilled workers, such as the host, domestic helpers, carers, factory workers, etc. Unfortunately, we don't have our slides here, but at my second slide, I am pointing out the data obtained from Badan Perlindungan Pekerja Migran Indonesia, or BP2MI, per July 2020. It showed that in total, 4,304 people working abroad, whereas 4,152 are women and 152 are men. So what does it imply? There has been feminization. Okay. Can we go to the second slide, please? The second slide. Yes, thank you. So what does it imply? There has been, di sini. Okay. There has been feminization in the field of migrant worker. There has been an imbalanced gender distribution in the context between women and men. So if we take it into a bigger picture, now we can tell that these women go abroad. They leave their family behind to earn the money, not only for themselves, but also for their families. They become the main breadwinner for their left behind husband, children, even parents, and other relatives. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So, and then the COVID-19 hit in late 2019. This table shows, if we can see, it's bigger, okay, that the early termination due to COVID-19 in all Indonesian provinces. We can see here East Java province suffered the most with total number 9,057, followed by Middle Java and West Java. The table clearly showed that 7,000 female migrants from East Java were forced to go home due to COVID. They have to give up their livelihood, and it surely impacts their family as well. So my research aims to study gender issues as the impact of COVID-19 among the international female migrant and their left behind families in East Java, Indonesia, particularly on issues of children education, family economic status, and family well-being. Apart from my PhD dissertations, the project was supported by Porspot Brawijaya Center for Global Health Populations and Policy PB Center. It is a collaborative institution between Universitas Brawijaya Malang and the University of Portsmouth, and it is funded by United Kingdom Research Innovations of Global Challenge Research Fund. Next slide, please. Berikutnya. Okay, so the household survey was on 605 households. And from this survey, we screened 30 women migrants and 30 left behind husband for further interview. The research was done in Desa Sukowilangun, Malang Regency, as one of the areas that sent the largest migrant worker in Malang during August 2020 until March 2021. A qualitative approach using in-depth interview was done, and the result was analyzed using Envivo 12 software to see the predetermined themes and the emerging themes. Next slide, please. So I'm structuring three main findings of my research. First, in terms of children's education and household responsibilities. There are issues on children's assistance in education, as we know that lockdown has put the children to practice school from home and required adult assistance. And interestingly, the data cover all possibilities, whether children were taught by father or left behind husband, taught by other family members such as grandparents, uncle, aunties, other relatives, even neighbors. But when the closest supporting system were unable to help these children studying from home, study found how mothers were also teaching their children from afar. Our respondent in Taiwan, for example, she helped her children studying English because this is a quite difficult subject for father and grandmother. However, this is a very rare case because we also found that children are helpless. Nobody can teach them because of family inabilities. So the left behind families convey that this is a part of main concern, particularly when the left behind families is forced to tackle so many issues at once, such as family income, children education, job-related issues, as well as health issues. Next slide, please. So in terms of gender issues and economic, we compile various narratives as follows. First, movement termination is related to how this pandemic has stopped thousands number of people from migrating. And the female migrant workers are forced to return or being cancelled to depart to destinations countries. And this sudden change has not yet been anticipated by any stakeholders. Women suffer in this area. Second, the income-related impact refer to how pandemic has impact on their livelihood. Massive reduction in all working aspects has decreased their wages and income, and this is faced by both women and men. Third, very much related with the previous explanations, the huge number of people losing their job because of COVID has been a really big hit, particularly for those working in service and informal sectors. So this is also faced by both women and men. And fourth, two issues from remittances are reductions of the amount of the money and the difficulty of sending them during the strict lockdown. And this is usually faced by women. And lastly is the household economic burden faced by the left behind men. The various financial problem has put the men in an overwhelming circumstances of handling the household economic burden. Okay, next slide, please. Berikutnya, okay. And lastly, in terms of health issues, particularly during the lockdown, first, mostly female migrants have health insurance, while their husband think it as unnecessary because women proceed this health insurance as a travel requirements, while left behind men remain at home, so there is no concern about having any insurance. So I think women have insurance and men don't have insurance is quite issue in this health matter. Secondly, migrant women have complained how the family health issue and in handling COVID-19 in Indonesia is very poor, and the health protocols are unobeyed, and there is a denial of the virus. Thirdly, this pandemic is prone to causing the stress for both families and women because they become more worried to each other. And lastly, female migrant stress issue has leveled up due to the lockdown because for domestic helpers, working from home has put their employer to stay at home much longer. And unfortunately, there is no regulation on fixed working hours, and they are servant, they must work if their employee asks them to do. They have to work however the employers ask. So there is no, this is a not good case for the woman's health. Next slide, please. So, okay, so it can be concluded here how we segregated the gender issue between migrant women and left behind men as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can see how female migrant women face issues on their migration terminations, the remittance and management in terms of reductions and sending them, and also how they suffer extra hours of work. On the other side, left behind men face issues on children education that I believe also faced by non-migrant family. They also face household burden, the limited insurance provision and health protocols issued during lockdowns. So furthermore, what I suggest is utilizing this finding on formulating decent regulations and implementations for decision makers and related stakeholders. So migrant is our main concern. I'm very sad if I acknowledge that they are known as the foreign exchange heroine or pahlawan devisa. But what we have done for them is very insufficient. Ethically speaking, we have to give more empathy and stand for them, particularly during this difficult time. So let me wrap up my session by conveying my gratitude to all of you who have been patiently listening to my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's very, very effective. You have 6 minutes for question and answer. Anybody want asking or give a response for Mbak Heni? Please. No one? It's very interesting finding, I think, because in Indonesia, a lot of problems we face because pandemic COVID-19. Maybe Mbak Heni can explain about how the coping strategy from migrant workers.
Yes, I think it's a quite it's a quite amazing to see how resilient our people are. Indonesian people are quite resilient. This has been a very difficult time for them, for sure. But I think, yeah, we cannot always look at that side. We are now suffering a quite severe causes of this pandemic, because almost 10,000 people now return from Malaysia, for example, the latest news I read. And then this has been a very disaster, like it's an unintended disaster, because even all the stakeholders in our country, they don't really have any strategy coping with this issue. All strategy were done only to anticipate the short-term impact, but we don't have anything yet or settled to overcome how if it happens in the long term. But the good thing is that now these women empowerment sectors among these migrants tend to see the possibilities of not sending them back, and how can we cope if we're going home, and then how can we cope these situations to rethink of instead of sending them back, no government trying to find the solutions of empowering them here instead.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's still in the hasabasa at the moment. We don't have a really particular idea how to settle with this issue yet.
Yeah, it's our problem together to solve it, not only for migrant workers or for government, but all of societies have a responsibility to solve this problem. Okay, I think because we have a limited time, thank you, Mbak Heni, for the very, very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I second presenter in this session. Here I have named Ibu Sri Setiawati from Universitas Andalas with the title of paper is Survival Strategies of Baru Scavenger Worm during the COVID-19 pandemic in Sawalunto. But in this session, Ibu Sri gave the chance to Mr. William Maxi to present the papers. Okay, Mr. Maxi.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask for the slides to be pulled up? As an introduction, I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to share at this International Conference on Gender, Culture, and Society. Unfortunately, I am not the primary author, but I will be sharing on behalf of Dr. Sri Setiawati, who is the primary author. I am William Maxi, representing a team of some university students at Universitas Andalas who worked with Dr. Sri Setiawati. So the research that we will be presenting and hearing on today is titled Survival Strategies of the Baro Scavenger Women During the COVID-19 Pandemic in Sawalunto. Can you please go to the next slide? So as a way of introduction, for those who are unfamiliar with Sawalunto and the coal mining in the area, the Ombilin mine is the oldest coal mining site. It's also the only underground coal mine in Indonesia. And Ombilin mine is located in Sawalunto. You can see there on the map that Sawalunto is one of the cities in the province of West Sumatra, about 95 kilometers northeast of Kota Padang or Padang City. The city of Sawalunto is known as the city of mines or the city of coal, and it's known colloquially as Little Netherlands or Belanda Kecil. Currently, coal mining is rarely undertaken, and it plays a very small role in the general life of the city of Sawalunto. However, there was an important change in 2019 that occurred when Sawalunto was designated as a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site, and this began to bring to the forefront several new possibilities, the biggest one being what is termed heritage tourism, based on the city of Sawalunto, its landscape, and its cultural sites. Next slide, please. So our topic today is on women as coal scavengers, mulung baro, and the presence of women within mining activities is quite striking. As many of you may know, in Indonesia, mining activities are generally undertaken only by males. However, at the mine in Sawalunto, women work as scavengers, hunting for coal that's scattered around the mining sites. So these scavenger jobs are not just done by women, but they're in fact dominated by women. If there are men who are involved in this job, almost all of the males are children or husbands of the female scavengers who have no other choice of work. So their work as mulung baro or coal scavengers is a testament to the resilience of these women. Next slide. The main research question that this article covers is describing the strategies used by the mulung baro women to support their family's income and to sustain their households. Next slide. As a general introduction, as a couple of the research methods, the research that was used in this article is a qualitative approach. It is a case study on the women who collect coal in Sawalunto, and it aims to study data that is integrated holistically. As the qualitative methods used, you can see included literature review, in-depth review, participant observation, life stories, and then also field group discussions. So these details can only be obtained when you talk directly to the community, visit their homes, their workplaces, and ask them to tell stories. And a subset of the research, the focus was on a feminist ethnographic approach. Now, according to Judith Dilorio, a feminist ethnography is research carried out by feminists focusing on gender issues in traditional, non-traditional, homogeneous research settings, and also in heterogeneous traditional and non-traditional research settings. In feminist ethnography, the researchers are women. The place of research is sometimes the world of women, and the main informants are especially women. As you know, the primary author, Dr. Sri Satyawati, is a woman, so you might find it surprising that I, as a male, am describing the feminist ethnography, but it makes sense in the larger scale of the researchers on this team. You can go to the next slide. And I wanted to add another quote about feminist ethnographers seek to reveal the problematic nature of what we call the I authorship. It's comparing opposing reports, readers, and fields of expertise to emphasize the partial and processual nature of all ethnographic writing. A better way to maybe understand it is what Lila Abu-Lughod wrote in her new feminist ethnography, where she argues that in anthropology, there's little acknowledgement of the ambiguous intermediate status shared by many researchers. In anthropology, there's a unified assumption that we are outside. So the data of the research were analyzed using the qualitative descriptive method, but a big part and facet of the research is it's a part of the activism, and the research activism was done in collaboration with Women in Mining and Energy, which is an NGO that provides advocacy on gender in mining and also the energy sector. Next slide, please. So let's go to results before we end with our conclusion. There were three main results that came out of the ethnographic research, the in-depth interviews, and also time with the mulung baro women. The first one is that many of the women have begun to supplement their work with existing skills. If we look at the pre-pandemic period, mulung baro rarely worked other than the work that they did as scavengers. So they rarely worked other jobs. There's a case in our case study with Mrs. Paini. She was trained and is currently trained in traditional massage, tukang urut, and now her main source of income is actually as a masseuse. So as a result of COVID-19, she is transferred over with a skill that she used to have. The second main result was that many of the women are what we call non-selective in their work. During the pandemic, they were forced to be non-selective in their work as long as it was still halal or permissible under Islam. So an example of this is that many of the Mulung Baro women have begun to perform jobs that are usually only relegated or done by men. There's another case with Mrs. Donna, where she actually began working as neighborhood security officer or also the community protection. Now, the last result that we focused on was reducing household expenditures. And as many of us know, during the pandemic, household expenses have become increasingly tight. So a general practice was that the Mulung Baro women were very selective about their household spending. And we can now go to the couple of slides. These don't have a lot of explanation other than here are some of the women that have been mentioned and are in the case study. You can go to the next slide, where here you have, those are several slides, and then the conclusion. So in conclusion, the research and also the article describes how it's very clear that women have the ability to support their households. During the adverse conditions of COVID-19, increasing numbers of women in Sawalunto took over their husband's role as the household's main provider of income. Previously, many of the men were considered to be the primary provider for the household, but in Sawalunto especially, it was largely in part due to the dramatic increase in male unemployment. So as males in the households were increasingly unemployed, the Mulung Baro or coal scavenger women in Sawalunto began to undertake various strategies as housewives in order to sustain their households. And also not only just to sustain, but they would add income generation through performing jobs that were viewed as normally reserved only for men. And the main example that I have mentioned was that one of the women worked for neighborhood security and also community protection. I think that's it. If you go to the next slide, I'm pretty sure, yep, it's just closing remarks of thank you for your time. Thank you for the generosity of everyone who sat in on this session. We appreciate it. And I think I will turn it over to the moderator and open it up for any last questions.
Okay, thank you, Max. I really appreciate because you hear and speak as a feminist. For me, a feminist not only for men, but everyone could be to be a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Concerned about the women's problem, women's operation, and etc. So you okay to say that I'm a feminist here. So yeah. No problem. Anyone who asks to Max? Okay, maybe I missed something here. How long this research conducted?
Yeah, I actually don't have the specific number of hours because there were several different researchers, but I think it was primarily done over the month of, I think it was June of this year. So it was primarily the month of June, but Dr. Sri Satyawati actually has done several trips that would be considered pre-research or preliminary research over the last year. And then also, would this research be just the on-the-ground research where they were doing the in-depth interviews, or then any of the follow-up and interactions with any of the women who were in the case study?
Okay, because I'm interested here. You mentioned that this feminist ethnographic approach to conduct this research, because we know that ethnography should be need a long time, because we to field many times, and yeah, it's not easy to involve with the women here, because in this your finding, I really surprised. Where is the men here? Why the women should be the men? Should be men? Yeah, I mean that's why they should be the household men primary, yeah, for get income. Is it a single women or
most of the women that were interviewed in the study were in households where there was also males who previously, before the pandemic, held jobs. A lot of the jobs in mining, due to the COVID pandemic, were shut down. But as a result of the women's role as scavengers, because they were scavengers or the pemulung, they have always been able to maintain their role in an informal way. Whereas the formal jobs, many of the men faced unemployment, but the women were able to still continue to do their role informally as parts of, as in society, they were sort of out of the normal standard system. So it was easier for them to maintain their role. And I think also due to the fact that many of the women were doing what would be considered a high risk role, it seems that many of these women are by nature and also by character quite resourceful. So it's quite clear from the research that these women had already faced challenges, and when the pandemic hit, they were able to take on the new challenge by using the pre-existing skills. So whether they were previously trained in massage, they then said they had the abilities to take on roles, whereas many of the men weren't able to cope with the new adverse conditions due to the pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very strong enough. They survive in every situation. The first, Maheni mentioned about the migrant workers, usually women too, and
Correct.
they become a too. And here in Sawah Lunto, we find the hero also. Women always have a power to resolve and to solve the problem. Okay, thank you very much. The time is enough, I think.
Thank
really
you.
interesting.
Yep, thank you all for your time.
Next. Okay, I will continue to the third presenter here. Ibu Ikhlasia Dalimunti from Universitas Negeri Jakarta. She will present her papers with the title Mapping Model of Social Vulnerability of Communities Affected by the COVID-19 Pandemic. Case study people in DKI Jakarta. Okay, Mbak Ika, time is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Anis Farida. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks to moderator, Mrs. Anis, and all of participants. Thanks for the time. And now, I want to present about my research, and the title is Mapping Model of Social Vulnerability of Communities Affected by the COVID-19 Pandemic. Case study, people in DKI Jakarta, daerah khusus Ibu Kota Jakarta. Research in the research, my team is Dr. Evi Clara and Mr. Saifuddin M. Kesos. Now, Mr. Saifuddin join with us too in this room. Okay, next, please. Okay, the COVID-19 pandemic is a form of hazard that has the potential to threaten all aspects of people's life, such as social, economic, health, and psychological. Social vulnerability makes the position of community regions experience a shock due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The culmination of social vulnerability that are currently being faced by society. First, apathy. Second, irrational actions. And third, criminal, and etc. Next. Next, please. The research problem is how is social vulnerability mapping in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? Second, what is the model instrumentation to the for making what is the model instrument for mapping social vulnerability in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? But this is multi-year research, and the second research problem maybe in the next research. Next. Methods. The research of approach is qualitative, and this type of research is phenomenological research. The location in this study is in the DKI Jakarta area, while the time of this research was carried on in 2021. It's April until July in 2021. Next. Research result, mapping of social vulnerability in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. First is limited space for social interaction. And second, disruption of household income. And the third is children are falling behind in learning. Yeah. Next. This is the model for mapping social vulnerability in communities. The first, we have preliminary studies and like literature studies and field research. And then we have social vulnerability mapping model, and the result is the third before I explain. Okay. In the second years, we want to develop about this research about the instrument and evaluation instrument about social vulnerability mapping. Next. The result of research. Second, model instrument for mapping social vulnerability in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. A social vulnerability mapping instrument. The instrument created is an instrument that can map social vulnerability that occur in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. B, evaluation instrument. The instrument created in an instrument that can assess the success of mapping social vulnerabilities that occur in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The conclusion is based on the result of research in the field, it is known that the mapping of social vulnerabilities in communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in DKI Jakarta is namely, first, limited space for social interaction, and second, disruption of household income. The second is children experience learning backwards. In addition, researchers also formulated alternative design in mapping social vulnerabilities in order to map the extent of the impact felt by the community due to the COVID-19 pandemic in DKI Jakarta. Next. Okay, thank you. Mrs. Anis.
Okay, Mbak Ika, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very efficient and effective.
Yeah, thank you.
Want to ask or respond to Mbak Ika presentation? So your hand or chat right on the chat room. No? Okay, Mbak Ika, maybe I'll ask you a little question. Nah, from Mbak Heni, can you share the model from the result of your research, please? Maybe Mbak Ika can share about the model.
Okay, maybe my friend Mr. Saifuddin can explain about the model of the research.
Mas Fadil,
Saifuddin, Mr. Saifuddin,
you saw
Oh,
the
yes.
model.
can you help to explain about the model research? Maybe in the slide, slide number,
Six.
Can help, yeah, okay. Maybe Mr. Saifuddin can help me about explain about this model.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Please allow the mother to add the explanation of the head of the research, Bu Ika. This study in an initial study to formulate a model for mapping community social vulnerability that have an impact on the COVID-19 pandemic. So the model instrument for mapping social vulnerability in community affected by the COVID-19 pandemic belum kita rumuskan modelnya. Jadi ini adalah preliminary study, jadi studi pendahuluan seperti itu. Kira-kira seperti itu.
Just in literature studies, ya, literature studies and we have a 20 informant, yeah, Mr. Saifuddin, and we have we have in-depth interview to them, and we have result studies about three result tadi. Three result is limited space for social interaction, disruption of household income, and children are falling behind in the learning. Sorry, maybe we belum ya, we belum membuat the model, the result of third result of research is about disruption of host limited space for social interaction, disruption of household income, and children are falling behind in learning. Maybe like this, Mrs. siapa tadi?
Henny, yeah, Miss Henny. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Ika.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Anis.
Yeah, we will move to the next question from Ibu Iva. How do family help the students, especially here the children problems? It might differ if they have primary school children and kindergarten kids. How is the father role? I think it's this question maybe for the Max before Mbak Ika, I think. So we can skip this, yeah, Bu Iva. Is it right?
Yeah, because my research not for role father.
Yeah, because Mbak Ika didn't present about this, the research about the mapping model of social vulnerability, and this not done yet, yeah, Mbak, yeah? It's still in a preliminary study like this, yeah.
Yeah. Because this is multi-year research, Mbak Anis, and
Okay.
I hope in the second years we can. This is just preliminary studies and literature review, and
Okay.
just only talk and or in-depth interview for to about 20 informants, and maybe in second years we can make the instrument model.
Okay. Thank you. So if we have time, we will back to Max, but not now. Now we will move.
But we have a result.
Okay.
The result of research is the three result of from the in the interview and literature studies is the first is limited space for social about the pandemic affected for the communities in DKI Jakarta. First is limited space for social interaction. The COVID-19 pandemic has made informants feel that their interaction space is experiencing obstacles and limitation. They find it difficult to meet face-to-face, to stay in touch with distant relatives, and including interacting with their close neighbors. The condition of COVID-19 has made people unable to live their normal social interaction as before the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second, disruption of household income, household finance have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The informants interviewed said that they experienced decreases in their income from that they received during the pandemic. The proportion of households with a greater decline in income are those with children and those living in urban centers. Urban households also experience a greater decline in income than households in the suburbs. Households across all income groups, from the poorest to the most affluent, reported the same percentage decline in income. There are many households that were previously economically secure and in the middle of the income distribution group then fell into poverty or become vulnerable to poverty. Informants said that the main contributor to the increase in spending was the increase in the cost of shopping for groceries and other basic necessities. The proportion of households with
Excuse
children.
me, Aika, sorry, I interrupted. Yeah,
Okay.
because time is up.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay. And then
Thank you very much,
yeah,
Aika.
yeah. Jadi
Maybe if we have time, we will discuss it later. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
okay,
Okay,
thank
thank
you.
you very much, Aika. So we
Thank you,
move to
Alice and all participants. Sorry.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mas Fadil chat that Mas Aris have a problem connection, so we move to the 5 presenter. Ibu Sumarni from Universitas Gadjah Mada, but in this session, she will be, I think, will be changed too, yeah, the presenter. Sorry, I forgot the name.
Good afternoon.
Siti Nasria will present the paper on behalf of Ibu Sumarni. Okay, Ibu Nasria, time is yours. Ibu Siti?
Yes, can you hear my voice? Is my voice loud and clear?
Could you
Hello?
open your camera?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Hello, is my voice loud and clear? Hello?
Okay, Mbak, I can hear your voice.
Okay. I'm so sorry I cannot change my virtual background. This
Yeah.
does not support the phone. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Thank you for this opportunity to present at this International Conference on Gender, Culture and Society. My name is Siti. I am presenting on behalf of the research team, of which the primary author is Ibu Sumarni from the Department of Psychiatry, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Over here also, I am presenting on behalf of Dr. Santi, Dr. Roni, Prima, Dr. Dianisa, also from the Universitas Gadjah Mada. So today, this afternoon, I shall be presenting our paper entitled Social and Religious Support for Postpartum Blues During COVID-19 Pandemic in Changkringan. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we are talking about postpartum blues and the role of decreasing postpartum blues, the role that can be played by midwives and husbands, through this study, we are supporting the Sustainable Development Goals number 5 and 3. So sustainable development goal, as we know, is one of it is to reduce maternal and infant mortality and eliminate all forms of discrimination and violence against women. And SDG 3 is about good health and well-being, of which one of the points is to reduce premature death due to non-communicable diseases through prevention, treatment, and promotion of mental health and well-being, and increasing access and coverage of services for mental disorders, including depression. Okay, so the next slide, please. So as a background, did you know that actually more than 50% of women who die by suicide are actually due to mental disorders after childbirth? One of the kind of mental disorders that women can experience after childbirth is what we call postpartum blues. Postpartum blues is this feeling of sadness and tearfulness over the first 2 weeks of giving birth. Usually women recover, but some can progress to postpartum depression or even postpartum psychosis. In psychosis, women can hear voices, can have bizarre thoughts, and this could even lead them to endanger themselves, like suicide, or even endanger their babies. If this condition is not diagnosed or not managed adequately. In the COVID-19 pandemic, postpartum women are especially vulnerable to mental disorders. A number of studies that have been conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic have shown that women are fearful and anxious about their own and their baby's safety during the delivery and the postpartum period. They fear that they themselves could be infected or their babies when they go to the hospital or they go to the midwives to check on their pregnancy and during birth. Also during the COVID-19 pandemic, studies have found that about 40% of postpartum women experience depression. Because the COVID-19 pandemic itself is already a difficult stressor for all of us, but in addition, women could also experience other stressors such as domestic violence, family conflicts, economic difficulties, if they lose their jobs or their husbands lose their job, and this can exacerbate the postpartum blues that women experience after childbirth. However, husbands and midwives are in a good position to provide social and religious support to overcome postpartum blues. Next slide, please. Yes. So what is the prevalence of postpartum blues in Indonesia? One reference says it's about 50 to 70%. But numbers are variable. In some parts of Indonesia, like East Sumba, it has been found to be about 80%. In Bandung General Hospital, about 35% was the number. In Blora, in Jawa, it's around 48.6%. In Yogyakarta, in a study in a certain area in the Yogyakarta City Health Center area, incidence was about 46%. And on the right side here, we also show that Changkringan. This map shows Changkringan area, which is the focus of this study. So previously, our Ibu Sumarni, our primary researcher, also conducted a study in a Changkringan shelter after Merapi eruption, and found that about 60% of women in this Changkringan permanent shelter home experience postpartum blues after childbirth. So this is quite a high number. And after the earthquake, also after the Bantul earthquake in Yogyakarta, also it was found that more than half of postpartum women experience postpartum blues. Next slide, please. Okay, so the aim of the study was to look at the effectiveness of social support and religious support that is provided by husbands and midwives on managing postpartum blues in women who have just given birth, who are postpartum mothers in Changkringan Health Center area. So Changkringan is a sub-district in Sleman. Okay, so the next. So the research method is quasi-experimental. There is an intervention and control group, and we have a pre-test and post-test control design. The study period was from March to June 2021 this year. Participants were postpartum women who just gave birth at the Aziza, Kisti Arum, and PKU Muhammadiyah midwifery clinics in Changkringan, as well as their husbands and midwives. So what are the tools that we used? We had some training modules for husbands on delivering social and religious support to postpartum women. And we had training modules for the midwives on how to deliver social and religious support to postpartum women, their clients. And the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, which is a widely used instrument to measure postpartum depression in women who just gave birth. And for statistical analysis to compare between intervention and control groups, we use the t-test. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so the intervention, the intervention group, is the group of women who received support from midwives and husbands who both received training from our team. So the midwives, they received training on how to give social and religious support via Zoom, 3 sessions. Yeah. So we met with each of the midwives from each of these clinics 3 times to deliver information about social and religious support, and as well as information about COVID-19 pandemic. The husbands received education or training through cell phone, could be a regular call or WhatsApp call if available, in 3 periods as well, before childbirth, and then when they were at the midwifery clinic, when preparing to go home after childbirth, and postpartum, so after they have returned home. Okay, next slide, please. So the intervention group is a group of women that received postpartum and postpartum religious and social support from both the midwives and husbands, whereas the control group was the women who received social and religious support from midwives only, who received training from our team. So their husbands were not trained by our team for the control group. So this is the results. We found that after the intervention group, this is the average EPDS scores. You can see that 12.2 was the initial average EPDS scores in the intervention group, and 12.8 in the control group, which are both more or less the same, and both quite high, because more than 9, we are quite worried. If the EPDS score is a bit more than 9, there's a likelihood that the mother could be suffering from depression and requires follow-up. After the mother received training on, after mother received social and religious support from the midwives, and husbands in the intervention group, the EPDS scores was decreased from 12.2 to 3.93, and in the control group from 12.8 to 7.13. And this decrease was significant. You can see the p-values for the t-test are less than 0.05. But what we can see here, although this is just a preliminary with the initial studies, we can see that the decrease is quite marked for the intervention group. So the group that received both social and religious support from midwives and husbands showed a greater decrease in EPDS scores. So, the next slide, please. Okay, so social support is a factor that affects a person's perception of where he or she will feel safe and comfortable during pregnancy and childbirth. I'm sorry, it's a bit loud over here. Can you hear my presentation? Yes. And the social support of husbands and midwives was found to actually reduce the degree of postpartum blues in postpartum mothers after the Bantul earthquake and after Merapi eruption in Sleman, in Yogyakarta particularly. Other references also show that social support, especially during COVID-19 pandemic, can protect pregnant women from anxiety and prevent the occurrence of mental disorders after giving birth. Also, it was from our Sumani 2013 and Hadianto 2016. We found that training on early detection of postpartum blues and depression will further empower midwives and further increase the knowledge and skills of midwives to study the symptoms that appear in postpartum women within the first 1 to 10 days. So they are able to detect postpartum blues quicker with adequate training. And the next slide, please. Over here also I have some references showing that religious support can have so many positive effects, and they can counter suicidal thoughts in those who are depressed, and it can also reduce anxiety and pain scale in pregnant women during pregnancy, and can reduce depression and improve cognitive function in people who experience disasters such as Merapi eruption. So, and also finally, religious experiences can cause a person to become calmer and more confident in dealing with anxiety during COVID-19 pandemic. So this is what we teach and train the midwives and the husbands, how they can support postpartum women through social and religious support to deal with their postpartum blues. And finally, we can conclude that, next slide. Social and religious support by midwives and husbands can significantly reduce the average postpartum depression scores in postpartum women during the COVID-19 pandemic in Cangkringan, Sleman. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, Mbak Siti, thank you very much. You only have 1 minute to respond, Mbak, any question. Please, Mbak Siti, respond.
Thank you very much for your question, Ibu Heni. In this particular research study, we mentioned that religious in the training module to the Bidan, we mentioned as a general there is evidence that religious support, anything like spiritual support, can help women to experience calmness and better manage their anxiety. But because our subject participants were all Muslims, and so we also had a lot of Doa and emphasis on Quranic recitation in our training modules. So mainly in our training modules was about Islamic religious support, but evidence shows that other religious support as well as maybe spiritual also support can help to alleviate anxiety, not only in pregnant women but also in general. Thank you very much for your question. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Mbak Siti. Thank you very much. I think the time is enough for you. And we have for the last presenter here, Bapak Aris. Is Bapak Aris here because the operator said that Bapak Aris have a problem with signal. Mas Fadil, Bapak Aris here? No? Okay.
I think no.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mas Fadil. We still have time for this session, about 10 to 15 minutes. And we have two questions for Max because every the participant is very, very want to know about your research deeply. Okay, Max, I give a time to you to make a response.
Thank you for the time. Are you referring to the question posed by Marli Zayeni?
Yes.
Or which? Yeah, I actually just finished typing up my answer. So should I put it in the chat, or should I just say what I had written up? Here, let me try and put it in the chat, and then I can't paste it here. Okay, I'll just try and as concisely say to the question about will the household seemingly collapse if wives do not do the jobs? Do you think from the feminist perspective, the wives are taking too much of responsibilities? It's too easy for the husbands? It's very difficult to answer in a concise way. One of the things that we wanted to emphasize is even the concept of a household is largely a cultural construct. So the role of a woman in a household in Minangkabau would be different than potentially the role of women among other ethnic groups, even in Indonesia. As many of you know, the Minangkabau are matrilineal, thus the women own the home, and also descendants or their children would come from the woman and not the father. So it's quite difficult to say, are the wives taking too much of the responsibility? Because it would be generally understood that if you're in a Minangkabau household, the women would take a different role than maybe perceived in other ethnic groups. So one of the things that the research wanted to emphasize was that the women were taking on roles as the coal scavengers, the pemulung, which basically guarantees that they are already considered in society to be quite poor, because this would not be a role that many of the women would choose to take on. And as a result, it's the force or the driving need due to the pandemic, which basically says that would the house collapse? Not sure, but it would be quite a massive strain on the economic need. And nuclear families would have to depend on larger families. So if you used a nuclear family perspective, which the West does, of mother, father, and children, there's quite a high likelihood that that would collapse. However, if you had a larger understanding of like the rumah gadang, the family home, which reaches out to the uncle or the mama, various roles, then it's unlikely that that would collapse for families who still had that general Minangkabau household. The difficulty with a place like Sawalunto, where you have a lot of ethnic diversity, is that not all of these families are coming from places where those households hold together. So I don't know if that's too long of an answer to say that depending on the situation and which case we're looking at, it would be quite difficult. But in general, we would say that many of the women that were studied are not going to stay in their positions long term that are only reserved for men. So there's the one, I actually forget what's the Indonesian for the, like the, not the satpam, but the ones who do the community protection, or the ones who are the neighborhood watch. Many of the women would not do those roles long term if the men were able to get their job and return to their job. So that would make it seem that the role of the male still has the place once the opportunity arises. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
very
hi
much.
Max. Thanks. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, it's very clear answer, and
Very clear, but we can see that he's being very careful in answering the question.
Well, it's also since I'm not the primary author, I also feel very hesitant. I don't want to speak directly for
Yeah,
Ibu
now,
Sri
as a
Setiawati,
Minangkabau
but
woman, I'm afraid that men in Minangkabau feel like life is too easy because
it's too
Minangkabau
easy.
women, yeah, I mean Minangkabau women seems to be able to do anything, you know, that they are too strong, they are too capable of anything, they will do anything, and I'm afraid that Minangkabau husbands feel like, you know what I mean. But thank you for your answer. Thank you for your answer. It is difficult to determine though. It's difficult to say.
okay, Mbak Lisa, I can feel your curiosity because you see problem for feminist perspective, and
yes.
try answer it with
Especially from
cultural
Maxi,
in
especially
Minangkabau.
from Maxi's perspective as a Western man. Yeah, I'm actually curious about his perspective as a non-Minangkabau woman, as a Western man, and seeing this situation here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ibu.
Yeah, it's a long discussion because they Max presented this is a ethnographic feminist person. So I think you're responsible to answer it with the feminist perspective too. But it's okay because he is not a primary researcher here.
It's also difficult because the role of the father or the husband is not primary in the research because the research is centering the women's perspective. So it's sort of outside of the scope of the research to say, is it too easy on the men, unless that comes directly from the women within the families. But if they feel empowered, because in a situation where they're the only ones who are able to provide, it makes it difficult to speak directly to that. Whereas maybe families who aren't in the same economic situation would say, well, this puts too much stress on the women. But in the case study, those families may actually feel that they're able to provide something and they're quite proud of that as the primary caregiver. So yeah, it's a good question. And maybe I can ask Dr. Sri Setiawati to follow up. If you have anything, you can also refer to her.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think it's not fair if we ask Max too much because he tried to present as he basis. I think we still have 5 minutes maybe or 10 minutes. Any question or response to other presenters besides Max? Come on. Any question?
I think there's
Or
a
Max
question
maybe
in the
ask
chat about the religious support. Did that get answered?
Mbak Siti? Hello? Mbak Siti? Mas Fadil?
Oh, yes.
Mbak Siti still here?
Hello.
All right.
Hello. Can
Hello.
you hear my?
Okay,
Hello.
Mbak Siti.
Yes, I think. Thank you very much. I think I answered the question. There was one question earlier about religious support. Yeah. So in this particular study, because our participants were all Muslims, we had a lot of slides in the modules about ways how to provide religious support for the Islamic religion. So on how to doa, how to the different types of dua that can be made, or the kind of supplication that we can make to Allah uh, before giving birth, or if we experience pain. So we had a lot of slides on that, yes, but it has to be emphasized that there are other studies on other religions as well, on the benefits of religious support in anxiety or depression. So yes, thank you for the question, Ibu Heni.
Okay. Any other question?
Hello, does that answer your question, Ibu Heni?
Yes, thank you, Mbak Siti.
Thank you, Mbak Siti. Thank you, Mbak Heni. If a question, question or response, we still have time to maximize our session. Mas Aris will come to this session or not?
I think Mr. Aris is still not joining us yet, so maybe we can just use this remaining time for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, photo session. Okay. Mbak Heni give a suggestion. We make a photo session before
Remind you
11.
as other moderator in other part, because in Indonesian's way, administratively, we were asked to give some evidence through photos like that, just to remind you.
Okay. Mas Fadil, could you take a photo for us?
Yes, Bu Amis. Okay, please open your camera. We'll start from 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mas Fadil. Okay, I think it's very, very interesting session, I think. But we have a limited time, and now 12 o'clock. So I'll close this session, and thank you very much for all the participants and presenters here. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Bu
Much.
Amis.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to the organizing committee.
Yes, welcome.